Canadian aircraft is about to deploy to the Indo-Pacific region, an area that has been hot, and it expects to be intercepted by Chinese fighter jets. Today is all about preparing for that. Come on board.
This is one of the final prep flights for this CP-140 Aurora long-range patrol aircraft. With its powerful surveillance tools, it can peer hundreds of kilometers into the distance, something adversaries don't want around.
Tower name and 3 arrive for departure, runway 30.
Soon it heads to Japan, ostensibly to help enforce UN sanctions against North Korea, capable of flying for more than 12 hours straight over the Yellow and East China Seas and the Sea of Japan, not far from China's land border. So they need to get used to this, a jet coming up fast and close to check them out, or potentially intimidate them to move off. This jet has been hired to give everyone a sense of how close the Chinese might come. Only a few meters away, sometimes less.
Now, as close as it may seem, that jet is, and it is close. Chinese fighter jets have been much closer.
Like this, a Chinese Navy fighter jet just off the nose of an American reconnaissance plane back in December. The Americans took evasive maneuvers to avoid a collision. Take a close look at the Chinese wing. Those missiles there could easily take the Americans down. And there was another incident again in February when a CNN crew was on board another plane.
The aircrew here identifies it as a J-11 that they say is armed with air-to-air missiles.
Canada has also faced something similar, never releasing video, but formally complaining to the Chinese that the encounter was dangerous.
The main thing for us in this situation is just to stay predictable. Basically, the name of the game is that we let ourselves be intercepted.
We can't use Captain Patrick's last name, like all the crew here, a safety request from Canada's military. With this training, he's ready for what might happen.
Yeah, depending on what circumstances, it can be a little bit nerve-wracking. Just gotta stay calm and focused. And so we look out for anything that could be potentially dangerous. If the intercepting aircraft is closing in or something like that, might have to do some avoidance again to stay safe.
What constitutes dangerous?
Like if they're turning in front of us, so if they're moving ahead of kind of our wingtip, where it's getting harder for them to see us behind.
But they do think about how to respond. We can't show you those tactics. They don't want them getting out. But they have responses to ensure their flight plans aren't disrupted.
What is it that makes an aircraft coming very close to you unsafe?
There's always the risk of turbulence, things like that.
Lieutenant Colonel Don Jamont is commanding officer of 407 Squadron.
And then, of course, the risk of an airborne collision is always real when you're operating in close proximity to other aircraft.
Your IFR clearance is valid, exiting CYD 106. Autopilot, engaged. Roger, 190, speeding up. Copy that. Roger.
Part of the challenge in the region is just whose airspace are you flying in? China sees part of the East and China Seas as its own, the water and the air above it, and feels that other nations shouldn't be flying their aircraft or using their vessels in that area. And that creates the potential for conflict.
Whatever happens will happen over the water. So the Aurora is practicing now over the Pacific, flying low over the waves using what is considered the most powerful long-range cameras ever to track what it's doing. This is precisely the mission they'll soon be on.
There are many that don't realize what the Aurora is capable of. It is multifaceted. The primary mission that we do is we hunt submarines. So that is our primary mission, is to hunt in the submarines. And other things that we do is reconnaissance, intelligence.
Captain Dave is another of the pilots.
Well, we're not talking about capabilities because what's behind us is secret.
That's right.
Very secret.
Absolutely.
This is about all we can show you of the surveillance operators. Their screens show a detailed picture of the water, all the vessels on it, and much more. The Aurora can also peer under the water using sonar buoys fired from the plane into the depths below, with microphones and other tech to hear what's moving in the ocean.
That would be things like submarines.
Precisely.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think of your job?
I love it. It's a very specific job.
And a job Canadian forces are increasingly being called upon to do. China is now the great strategic competitor to Western democratic nations. Canada dispatching warships into the waters surrounding the Asian nation. They too will be shadowed. China now has the largest navy in the world by number of vessels.
It's such an important region for the world, and the stability there is just key for Canada's prosperity and security, and for the prosperity and security of our allies.
Canada alone can't do much. This plane, set to be replaced, is more than 40 years old. But it can't go off into the sunset just yet. In an increasingly competitive and dangerous world, there are ever more calls for military deployments. This Aurora and her crew, next to answer that call.
So David, as I watch that, I just really want to know, what's it like on that plane?
Well, it's impressive, beautiful also, because you're right over the mountains or out over the ocean, sea and sky together, stunning. But of course, the military was taking a leap by putting us on that plane because of the secretive nature of what is in the middle, all of that surveillance equipment.
I suppose it would not necessarily be unusual for the Chinese Air Force to try to intercept that plane.
No, certainly not. In fact, the idea of interceptions, be it the Chinese or the Russians or Canadians or Americans or what have you, interceptions are normal. It's just now that this is happening in a strategically important part of the world, Asia, with China, a rising global power. And so the friction is much more there now.
All right, David Common, as always, thank you.
Thank you.